Good afternoon. Janet Steinmeier. I'm the president of Lesley, and it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome you here today, and in turn to welcome Jason Reynolds as our speaker for Black History Month. For many of you, Jason needs no introduction. He's an award-winning and best-selling author with a huge following on social media, a bona fide star on campus and off. I had the pleasure of introducing Jason in June when he spoke to students in Lesley's program in creative writing, the MFA program in creative writing, where he's been a faculty member for over 5 years. It was just a wonderful event and a very intimate conversation. I think after that, I told people for months about the fact that Jason spoke to each of us as if he was reading his book and answering questions directly to each one of us. I would say that not only do I remember what you said, Jason, but I remember how it felt. And it was just such a wonderful experience. One of the things I cite as an example of how Zoom can be incredibly wonderful. And since last summer, Jason's star has ascended to new heights. He's been called the voice of a generation, and his voice is very much in sync with the watershed moment that we have here in history. With so many unprecedented national events taking place in quick succession, we desperately need writers like Jason to put it all in historic perspective and to bring his keen sense of justice to bear. Among Jason's great talents is the ability to engage and empower younger readers to see themselves in these stories and to become agents of change. His writing keeps audiences of all ages honest about how much work we have to do to achieve racial equity in America. And that's what he'll be doing in his talk today, which he has titled The R Word, How Racism Spread Across the Nation. So Jason, welcome. We thank you so much for joining us today and for being such an inspiring member of the Lesley community. And now I'm going to turn the Zoom stage over to Jonathan Jefferson, our Provost.
Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who may not have met me, I'm Jonathan Jefferson. I'm the Chief Academic Officer and Provost here at Lesley. And I would like to add my welcome to all of you this afternoon, and especially to you, Jason. We are so thankful and grateful that in your busy schedule, because I know what the schedule was like to get to this date. And so we are just so thankful that you were able to find the time in your schedule to come spend some time with your Lesley family. And it's always good, as you know, depending on the way that you were raised, when you have a homecoming or someone's coming home for dinner, it's always good when that person comes to the dinner table. So thank you for coming to our dinner table this afternoon. And thank you for the brave and courageous conversation you're going to have with us about the R word and what that means, what that looks like, and hopefully to provoke us to what we can do about it. So we are very much looking forward to our conversation with you. And we're very much looking forward to you being your genuine, authentic self and to be the storyteller. And we're going to be all sitting here for story time. And we're just so grateful for you to be here with us. Thank you, Janet, for turning this over to me. I know that you only can stay with us for a few minutes, but we appreciate you being here to introduce Jason. And at this time, I'm going to turn over to Professor Danielle Georges, who's going to introduce Jason to everyone. Danielle.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my great pleasure to introduce Jason Reynolds, a member of the faculty of the Master of Fine Arts program in creative writing here at Lesley. I want to say that Jason is a popular instructor is an understatement. Students in the Writing for Young People specialization or genre clamor for his mentorship. Prospective students, not yet in the program, clamor for his mentorship. Students beyond the genre want to work with him. Jason offers his brilliance to our graduate students in the MFA program and to everyone in the program in general. So a little bio. Jason Reynolds is an award-winning and #1 New York Times bestselling author. His many books include Miles Morales' Spider-Man, the track series with the books Ghost, Patina, Sunny, and Lou. The book Long Way Down, which received a Newbery Honor, a Prince Honor, and a Coretta Scott King Honor. And Look Both Ways, which was a National Book Award finalist. His latest book, Stamped, Racism, Antiracism and You, is a collaboration with Ibram X. Kendi, and he'll be speaking about this book today. Jason Reynolds is the 2021 National Ambassador for Young People's Literature, which is an appointment made by the Library of Congress. And he's appeared on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, The Late Night Show, or Late Night with Seth Meyers, and CBS This Morning. He lives in Washington, D.C., and you can find his ramblings, according to him, at jasonwritesbooks.com. So I want to turn the screen over to Ambassador Reynolds.
Ambassador. That's awesome. I appreciate it. Thank y'all. It's good to be here. Thank y'all for having me. Thank you for all of the warm welcome. I do teach and work at Lesley, and I enjoy it very, very much. And so it's an honor to be here and to be talking with you all, a place that I've worked for 5 or 6 years now. So many wonderful students I've been able to partner with as we sort of suss out and work through what it means to wrestle with language and find meaning in the codes of letters. And it's been a fantastic experience. This will be interesting because we are going to talk about what seems to be the most difficult and complicated thing for us to talk about in this country. I will warn you all, though I don't necessarily owe anyone a warning, but I will say this. The authentic self that was mentioned is a very real thing for me. And sometimes to a fault, my wonderful students, I know there are moments where they're like, yo, this dude doesn't act like a professor, doesn't act like a teacher, that's for sure. But I just know that I operate at a single speed, which is the speed of truth and authenticity. It's all I got, it's all I know, it's how I was raised. And so this will be, you all will get an honest piece of who I am, and just know that this is what love looks like. And that I want us to, and that I don't have the answers. I want to be clear because I'm careful to set myself up for those kinds of expectations. I don't have the answers. What I really want to do, and what this book is meant to do, is really sort of put us in a situation where we can ask more questions, right? And where we're unafraid to lean into what those questions might be, and where we can sort of have some reckoning with ourselves around race in America and really kind of tussle with it a bit. I think it is imperative and necessary for all of us to complicate our arguments, all of us, no matter who you are. Whatever you think you know, complicate it, because it is healthier to do so. The moment that we continue to, that we sort of let ourselves know a thing or simplify a thing, then it immediately becomes reductive, which in turn immediately makes it harmful. And so always try to complicate the arguments. And that's all I really am trying to do with this book, is put us in a situation where we can challenge each other and complicate our own arguments, to sort of hopefully find our way to a more equitable world. Very simple. I'm going to read just a little bit from the book. I usually don't do this, but I want to give us at least a little bit of voice, a little tone to set the mood for what I want to address. And then I'll get into my talk for a bit, and we'll take some Q&A, which I'm really excited about. Please feel free to engage in this discussion. Like, that's what makes college awesome, right? Like, if there's no discourse, there really is no education. So feel free to engage with some discourse in the Q&A, and then we out of here, easy peasy. I'll read a bit from chapter 1. Here we go. Before we begin, let's get something straight. This is not a history book. I repeat, this is not a history book, at least not like the ones you're used to reading in school. The ones that feel more like a list of dates, and there will be some, with an occasional war here or there and a declaration, and of course, we gotta mention that. A constitution, mention that too. A court case or two, and of course, the paragraph that's read during Black History Month. Harriet Rosa Martin, this isn't that. This isn't a history book, or at least it's not that kind of history book. Instead, what this is a book that contains history. A history directly connected to our lives as we live them right this minute. This is a present book. a book about the here and now, a book that hopefully will help us better understand why we are where we are as Americans, specifically as our identity pertains to race. The R word, which for many of us still feels rated R, or it can be matched only with another R word, run, but don't. Let's all just take a deep breath, inhale, hold it, exhale, and breathe out race. See, it's not so bad, except for the fact that race has been a strange and persistent poison in American history, which I'm sure you already know. I'm also sure that depending on where you are and where you've grown up, your experiences with it, or at least the moment in which you recognize it, may vary. Some may believe race isn't an issue anymore, that it's a thing of the past, old tales of bad times. Others may be certain that race is like an alligator, a dinosaur that never went extinct, but instead evolved, and though hiding in murky swamp waters, that leftover monster is still deadly. And then there are those of you who know that race, and more critical, racism, are everywhere. Those of you who see racism regularly robbing people of liberty, whether as a violent stick-up or as a sly pickpocket, the thief known as racism is all around. This book, this not history book, this present book is meant to take you on a race journey from then to now, to show why we feel how we feel, why we live how we live, and why this poison, whether recognizable or unrecognizable, whether it's a scream or a whisper, just won't go away. This isn't the be all end all. This isn't the whole meal. It's more like an appetizer, something in preparation for the feast to come, something to get you excited about choosing your seat, the right seat at the table. So I want to give you some background because the book's got all this fuss around it now. So I feel like I should knock myself down a peg and tell you all the truth. I did not want to write this book. I was not interested in doing this work. I would have never done this, to be honest with you. Not because I don't care about the topic. I care about it tremendously. I almost care about it so much that it's difficult for me to write about it because I never separate myself. I never intellectualize my own Blackness. I live as a Black person every single day of my life. I never think about it because it is who I am and what my experiences have been. So to separate that, to sort of become critical and try to figure out ways to create sort of some kind of text that becomes more informative would have been difficult for me to do. Dr. Kendi, who wrote the original version, Stamped from the Beginning, who I'm sure most of you have heard of or know at this point, he won the National Book Award in 2016. I happened to be there that night. I was nominated for a book called Ghost. And when he won, he basically became one of the most famous race scholars in America immediately. He took a job at AU. He was working in Florida. He took a job at AU, American University, here in Washington, D.C., where I live. And 6 months later, showed up in my town. He called my phone. Jay, I'm in D.C. Me and the wife have moved here. We don't know nobody. Let's get up and get a bite to eat, you know. And what do you say, right? It's like, all right, you know, I don't want to leave the guy hanging. Here he is in a new town, new city, new job. He's got a little baby, right? It's like, all right, let me hang out with my guy. We go to dinner. What I didn't know was that this wasn't a regular dinner. He didn't want to catch up and get the lay of the land. He was really kind of baiting me in so that he can ask me this question. Jason, do you think you'd be willing to write an adaptation of Stamped from the Beginning? Something a little more accessible, something for younger people or for anyone who doesn't have the capacity and or time to read the big boy? And my response was absolutely not. And as I've told this story so many times, and there's always that moment where people say, I can't believe you said no to Dr. Ibram Kendi. I can't believe you said no to this process, as if any of you would have said yes, right? As if it's so easy to say, yes, I'll take on this massive, this behemoth job, this thing that you've made that's won all the awards and has now catapulted you into superstardom. I'm gonna take it and pick it apart to make it something else. My mama taught me it's best to leave well enough alone. And that book was well enough, right? He asked me again, maybe 3 months later, Jay, I'm just following up with you, which is weird because when you say no to somebody, that's the end of it, right? But I'm just following up with you, see if you change your mind. I haven't changed my mind, bro. Now, the other component, the other part of that no, of that sort of refusal was that I also was scared, insecure, right? And this is important to note, and I like to make sure I say this. I know we're going to talk about race in a second, but for all of the students, grad and undergrad, who are writing or doing anything for that matter, whatever your focus of study is, it don't matter if you make it or not in terms of your insecurity is your insecurity, right? It's yours regardless. We can all tell you, everybody, all your professors know famous people who are insecure. People who are wildly successful in their fields who are insecure. People who run universities, right? Not the ones who run Lesley, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it don't matter what your position is. It don't matter what your position is. All of us are human beings, and therefore, like, we all know where our weaknesses lie, where our opportunities lie. We know where the threshold is. I know exactly what I'm capable of until I press myself to realize that I'm oftentimes capable of more. But I feel like I know where the ceiling is, right? So I'm telling this man no, because I know that I was not a good student. I was not a strong college student. I was not a strong scholar. I am not what you would consider an academic, right? My classes at Lesley, when I'm teaching my MFA classes, are wildly different simply because I'm shooting from the hip. I'm a gut teacher. I know what I know, but I don't always have the academic lexicon to explain it the way that my colleagues do, but I know how to get you there. I can get you there, right? Just go with me, right? I got an intuition. I know that much, but I know that I don't know how to research very well. I wasn't that great at studying. This is the fact, not just in college, through school in general. So for this scholar, this academic, this man who at this moment is at the top of the ladder, asking me to take on this piece of scholarship felt a little out of my league. I felt out of my depth. So I say no the second time. He comes back a few months after that, the gall of this man, a few months after that, and says, yo, Jay, I'm gonna ask one more time, brother. I know you said no twice, but like, I think this is a good thing for us to do. I think you can do it. I think you can do it. I'm like, what makes you think that I can do this? He's like, man, look, I just know that like whatever that thing you have is a thing that I think we can use to really shift the landscape. Because now if you do it, then we can put this book in the schools at a younger age. We can really start the kids off having this conversation earlier. And imagine what that would do 20 years from now if they grow up with a different kind of lexicon under their tongue as it pertains to race. If they grow up unafraid of discomfort around this conversation. Imagine what the world looks like if we could give them this, if we can arm them with this information. Everybody who knows me knows I love the kids. Everything I do it for the children. I love children. I love the work I do. I do it for the reasons, I got in this because I really wanted to make a difference in the lives of children. And so he kind of hit my sweet spot, right? And I'm like, all right, bro, like, I'll do it. And immediately regretted it. I started to work on it, and I proved myself right that I was in over my head. I felt like I was drowning, you know? I mean, that book is 700 pages. I'm sure it's back there somewhere. 700-page book. It's intense, you know? And I'm trying to figure out how to make a different version of it. I'm basically editing his version. And I turned my first draft in after 9 months, and it was terrible. And the editor said, Jason, this feels like, it feels too schooly, feels too academic, it feels too dense. It feels exactly like the book that we're trying, like it feels like his book, and we're trying to sort of not do what he already did. He wrote a book that like all the scholars love, and this thing is working in a space of scholarship. We're trying to figure out how to write something for the rest of us. I'm like, well, okay, I'll try again. Took another swing at it, another pass. 9 months later, and it's pretty much the exact same draft. I pretty much rewrote the exact same draft, right? Now, at this point, I'm pretty much at the point where I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and bow out. I know when I've been beaten, right? And this is another thing that I like to make sure I tell people, because, you know, if it were up to your favorite artists, they would tell you that quitting was never an option for them. And it's lies. All of it is lies. I want you all to know that. All of it it's all a bunch of romanticized lies that go along with the headshot of them sitting at their typewriter with their glasses and corncob pipe. That is a photo shoot, also lies. All of it is lies. I want to make sure you understand this. There is never a moment as an artist that we are not regular human beings, right? Sometimes you feel like quitting. That is the truth, right? And so I'm ready to quit. I decided that I was going to go to New York, have a meeting with our editor, give the money back and say, you know what, I'm gonna help you all find somebody who can really do this. I know there is a teacher, a professor out there, a scholar out there a young scholar who's just ready to rework something, who's probably mad at the academy and is ready to take on rewriting this kind of book. I just knew it. I was like, I will find this person for you. And so I go, I schedule the lunch, I'm ready to give this spiel. And the editor says, Jason, you know, the problem is you keep trying to rewrite or edit his book. And I say, what exactly did you hire me to? I'm so confused about the brief here. What did you hire me to do? And she said, we hired you to write your book using his research. That's it. Not edit his book or make an adaptation of his book or a revision of his book. That's not what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to write your book, your version of whatever that looks like, simply using his research. And then my response was, well, if you know anything about me, anything, it don't take long, by the way. Most of y'all who don't know me can probably tell this already. If you know anything about me, you know that if you want me to do that, I'm gonna have to make a mess of things. I'm gonna poke fun at it. I'm gonna be a bit irreverent. It's just the way I live my life. It's the way I really feel. I'm gonna try to be honest about how I truly feel about this kind of book. And she said, okay, well, that's what we want you to do. We want you to trust yourself. And let's see if you can, like, what would this book be like if this was just a Jason Reynolds book? What would it be like? It's like thinking about, like, what would it be like if this was a Stephen King book, right? And then, like, all the racists were like vampires or like something crazy like that. Like, it was like literally putting it through this filter, basically. Put it through the Jason Reynolds filter, and let's see what that looks like when you distill it through your own lens. And I say, okay, well, I'm gonna have to ruin the book. And she says, sounds like a plan. Go for it. And I got back on the train and I was sitting there on the phone with my mother and I was telling my mother, you remember how much I hated this in school, how much I couldn't stand history, how boring I thought it all was, how I slept through most of my college years. I know this is a terrible thing to tell college students, for those of you who are listening, but this is the truth about my personal journey through this thing. I got better over time, just so you know, but it was rough for me. And I said, I just can't do this. I don't like history books. This can't be a history book. She said, okay, well, then maybe that's the framework in which you need to work through this thing. And that's the reason why the book begins. This is not a history book. The reason why is because I know that 16-year-old Jason wouldn't want to read a history book. And I know that 16-year-old Jamal around the corner also probably wouldn't want to read a history book. And the best way for me to get him to settle into these pages is to let him know from sentence one that that ain't what this is. Right? Now I'm off to the races. 2 months later, now we're 2 years into the process. And 2 months later, I turned in the draft and went straight to copy edit. And that's the draft that you all have in your hands. I tell that story because one, it's important that all of you know, no matter what you do, teachers, students, administration, it's important that we all sort of remember to trust ourselves. Despite our insecurities, despite our limitations and weaknesses, you know, it's important to remember to trust yourselves. And number two, this was the finest moment in showing how one can push back against assimilation, right? This was me living the idea that I don't gotta be Dr. Ibram Kendi because I can't be that. That ain't me, that's him, right? When I'm at work at Lesley, I can't be, you know, my colleagues whom I love and who are brilliant, but I can't be them because that's not who I am. And they can't be me or each other for that matter. We all have our own thing. And I gotta be okay with that. And I shouldn't have to fit into some mold. If I am qualified to be here, I shouldn't have to fit into a mold to prove that, right? And so in this process of making this book, I'm realizing this is exactly what the book is about, right? Imagine the freedom of being like, you know what, I'm gonna write this book my way, in my voice, my style. I'm gonna swing the bat the way I swing the bat. I'm gonna walk this walk the way I walk the walk, and we're gonna see what it looked like on the other end. And it turns out that it felt familiar. It felt like something that just might work, right? Now, that being said, I wanna address two more components of the book, and then I wanna open it up. It was important for me. So in his book, he lays out like, look, there are three archetypes, right? These three archetypes are the archetypes that all of us sort of fit into one way or another, or multiple times in a day or in an hour or in a lifetime, right? segregationists, which is basically the racist that we all think of when we think of racists, right? When we think of someone who is racist, we think of a segregationist. This is like racism classic, you know what I mean? This is like, you know, Klansmen, you know, the bus drivers who wouldn't let you sit on the front of the bus in the 1950s, right? Like very obvious, like we segregate ourselves based on the fact that we believe that you deserve less, or you don't deserve what we deserve, or you don't belong where we belong, or you don't get to live a life that we get to live simply because of the color of your skin. Very simple. This is racism 101, basically, the segregationists. In my story, I like to call these people haters, because that's what they are, right? All of us got haters. We all know what haters are. It don't matter how old you are, we all know what a hater is. My mama is 75 and talks about haters all the time. As a 75-year-old, she's like, look, these people, Jason, I'm telling you, they don't think I know, but I know they all a bunch of haters. She'd be talking about her own homegirls and be like, all of them a bunch of haters. And it's one of these things where I realize in this moment, oh, hate is perennial. This lasts forever. It's evergreen, right? The hater has always been around. Judas was a hater. We got all kind of historical context for the haters, right? And all the hater is a person who hates you for not being like them, right? Like we used to say when I was a kid, they hate me because they ain't me. You know what I mean? When really what it is they hate me because I ain't them, you know? And then you have this middle ground. And this middle ground is actually the space that most of us occupy, whether we know it or not. The assimilationists. Assimilationism is a complicated thing, right? It's an interesting sort of gray area that many of us fit into or try to fit into in order for us to sort of be able to navigate a racist world, right? My mother, when she read this book, was crestfallen because she realized, oh no, Jason, have I lived my entire life as an assimilationist? And the answer to this question was yes. Yes, you have. But it is only fair to contextualize her experience around the America that she grew up in. I can't be mad at a woman who did what she had to do in order to survive. For her, assimilationism meant life or death. It meant whether you were going to work a job or you weren't. You were going to feed your family or you weren't. It was a very real thing, right? But the basic concept of it is that Black folks should try to make sure, in this particular racial structure, Black folks should figure out how to contort themselves, or at least how to create some sort of proximity to the white standard in order for them to be associated with whatever the white standard brings about, right? So for instance, if I want to get a job, you know what I got? You know, when I was younger, for instance, I'm covered in tattoos. I've had tattoos since I was a 14, 15-year-old boy, right? Which is a whole other story. And when I started getting tattoos as a kid, the teachers would say, Jason, you're never going to get a job, right? You're never going to get a job. And all the people who are a little older remember that there was a big deal. This hair, Jason, no one's going to hire you with hair like this, right? You can't get a job. And so what I would have to do is I would have to cut my hair. I would have to, when I worked corporate, which is a long time ago for a very short amount of time, I had to wear sleeves all the way to my wrists so that you couldn't see the tattoos on my arms. Because they felt like it was inappropriate for me to have tattoos, right? It's about this idea of like, yo, there's a particular way that we all have to speak, which is complicated because there is no such thing as standard English. Like it's weird. There's no such thing as like this idea of proper English in America is funny because Americans only speak American English. And if you talk to anyone who is English, who is British, they'll tell you that what we speak is not English. It's our version of it. Right? It's our version of it. And it doesn't mean that the version that we speak shouldn't be spoken. It just means that it's unfair for us to diminish or dismiss the different dialects of English that exist within our country as if they are less than, when the truth is that they are not, right? There are, I mean, if anybody speaks French and you know somebody who's Haitian and then you know somebody who's from Paris, they speak in a different kind of French, right? And if you talk to a French Canadian, now we really have like, same with like Spanish. My homies who are Mexican, when they're in the room with my friends who are Dominican, it's hard for them to communicate. Even though they both speak the same language, they just speak different iterations of it, different versions of it. And those versions have been sort of informed by the cultural context, which means that if you dismiss any version, you dismiss the culture from which those versions come. And that is why assimilationism is dangerous, right? It means to tuck yourself into the pocket of whiteness in order for you to be accepted in some way. Black folks know what I'm talking about. I'm a big person. I'm 6'3", 230 pounds, big, dark-skinned, hairy, tattooed man. And I always am expected to make myself small in the presence of white people in order to make them feel comfortable about my existence on this planet. That's a problem, right? That's what assimilationism is all about. And then, and so in the context of my version of this, I always say, you know, assimilationism is all about your fake friends. Because we all got fake friends. We act like we don't, but we all know we do, right? This is another thing my mother has proven at 75. Because the people that she calls haters are also the people she calls her best friends. And that's how I know my mom is a fake friend, right? I know it for a fact, right? My mom is the fake friend in that situation. And it never goes away, right? We all know these people that's like, yo, I love you. And then they turn around and you're like, you know what? She get on my nerve. I can't stand her, right? We all know these people, right? And basically what it says is, I love you as long, I love you as long as you are like me. So the hater says, I hate you because you're not like me. The assimilationist says, I love you if you are like me. I rock with you as long as you like me, I like you. But if you're not like me, I don't rock with you no more. This is every teenage movie, every teenage school movie, Mean Girls. Like, I mean, we can list all of them. Clueless, every single one. It's always the moment where the new girl comes, she shows up, she's a little nerdy, everybody teases her, she gets a seat at the cool kids table, and then she starts acting like a cool kid, and they accept her because she starts acting like a cool kid, and by the end of the movie, she can't keep up the front anymore, and she realizes, I don't want to be a cool kid because you all are bullies. And then they say, oh, it turns out you're actually the cool kid in the first place, and all of us are really the nerds. This is the way it goes, right? We've seen this movie. Oh, we saw it in the 70s. We saw it in the 80s with all the John Hughes movies. We saw it in the 90s, right? It's the same sort of archetype, right? We see this story, which is the reason why I wanted to base this in high school. We know it. My high school turns out is true, that high school really is a microcosm of life. The assimilationists really are your fake friends. And then there's the last category, the last archetype, the most important of the lot, the anti-racist. The anti-racist is very simple. These are the people who love us. Simple. The anti-racist says, I love you for being like you. The hater says, I hate you for not being like me. The assimilationist says, I love you as long as you are like me. And then the anti-racist says, I love you as long as you like you. I love you for being who you are. That's it. You deserve to exist simply because you are. That's anti-racism. It's a simple concept that scholars have given so much interesting text and verbose language, right? When really it's just like, treat people like human beings. That's all. It don't matter where you come from, what you look like. Don't matter what language you speak, what color your hair is, how many tattoos you got on your body, your piercings, your sexual orientation, your religion, don't matter. You breathing, you deserve. That's it. Simple. If you are alive, you deserve to be alive. It's a very simple thing. And I'm not going to get in the way of any freedom of yours just because you might be different from me. Imagine a world that we could live in if it was an anti-racist world. Now, the last thing I want to mention before we open it up for some Q&A is, to me, the most important part of this entire book, which happens to be at the end of chapter 1, where we're trying to figure out, is there a such thing as the world's first racist? Dr. Kendi did all this research and he found out that perhaps there is. There was a Portuguese man named Gomes Eyanes de Zurara, you know. And the interesting thing about this man was that he was not a slave trader. He was not one of the people slaughtering or pillaging Africa. He was the man next to the man doing those things, right? He like the driver. You know how when I was growing up, it was like, hey, don't trust the driver. The driver is really with it, you know what I mean? You knew all the bad guys, but it was like, look, they cool, but the dangerous person is the driver, right? Because the driver got all the information. You know, my daddy used to drive for the mob. Long story, true story though. Now you get to know what kind of family I come from. You know what makes this. Now you see why I am this way. My daddy was a driver for the mob, right? And when he was younger, and he would always say, the driver hears everything and nothing at all, right? Meaning the driver is the only person that is privy to every single piece of information, but the driver knows not to repeat it. In this case, the driver repeated it. Gomez and Yanez de Zurara was ascribed to the Portuguese royalty. They went into North Africa to pillage the land for gold. They were so angry that the Muslims and the Moors of North Africa had all this resource, all this natural resource, and they had to figure out how they were going to get them out of the way to take all the gold, right? At this time, of course, you all know this by now, but Europe was conquering the world. Right? Every history book has told that part of the story. Europe conquered the whole world. You know what I mean? Like this little teeny continent was spreading out and conquering everywhere. And at the time, it wasn't uncommon for there to be prisoners of war in the form of slavery, even if these people were also Europeans. I want to make this very clear, right? White people were they weren't called white people. There were no white people. There was you were Spanish, you were French, you were British, you were Dutch, right? And everyone was sort of conquering each other, and then they were using each other as prisoners and then slaves. The Portuguese go into North Africa, and they say, when they go into North Africa, they say, we're going to separate ourselves, our brand, we're going to separate our brand by changing the narrative about why we are enslaving the North Africans. We're going to set ourselves apart. How are we going to set ourselves apart? Well, the Dutch and the French and the Spanish, they are doing this strictly because of war and for power dynamics and for conquering and pillaging, right? But for us, even though we're doing all that, what we're going to say is we're doing it for salvation. We're doing it as a benevolent gesture. This is missionary work. We are going into North Africa. We are taking the African savage, and we are going to give them civilization. We are going to give them, couth. We are going to give them education, and most importantly, we are going to give them Jesus. This is the way this is the narrative that Gomez Yanez de Zurara came up with as a way to say, we are benevolent captors. We are not like you savages, the rest of Europe. We are not like you mean, angry beasts who are just slaughtering people to take their land. No, we're not doing that. We're taking their land only because it is necessary for them to get the education we have for them to make them whole human beings. Right now, they are simply animals. They are at base level, and we're trying to elevate them to whole human consciousness. And this narrative that justified slavery in the 1400s in Portugal is the narrative. He wrote a book about it, by the way. It's a book. And he wrote this book, and this book became a best-selling at the time, their version of a best-selling book that spread all over Europe, that every other European country started to use as a way to justify slavery. And you know what happened a couple hundred years later? That same exact justification touched down in North America. That same exact thing. And we are not just raping and pillaging a land, we are actually civilizing a based people. And that narrative justifies slavery and racism, by the way, after slavery for now, over 400 years. And the reason why this is very important is because the whole thing was made up in the imagination of a person and written down as a piece, as a story, as a language, words, written as a narrative that spun on its own axis, which means that perhaps if it could set forth 400 years, a figment of imagination and a couple words on the paper, perhaps with a little more imagination and a few more words, we could start to set things right. Perhaps. Why would that seem so far-fetched, right? Perhaps language and imagination could start to move things the opposite way if it set forth all of it. Sheer imagination and narrative. If I could do the same thing, if you all could do the same thing, if all of us could use language and really understand how language works, we really underestimate, not the writers, right? But a lot of us really underestimate the power of language. Without language, there is no reality, not just culture. Nothing exists without a name, right? We name it. We had to, I mean, look, whatever your spiritual practices are, whatever it is, doesn't matter. I know it's inappropriate to talk about it. Doesn't matter. The point is, we always have to name that thing too. The thing that none of us can actually, the thing that's incomprehensible, we still had to name in order for it to feel real to us, right? That is how language works, which means if we could shift language, perhaps we could start shifting culture, and this book is meant to do just that, all right? I will end it there, and we'll take some questions. I hope that was cool and informative, or at least interesting. You know.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you so much. And now we're going to open it up to the question and answer section where we have Merlin Mayhew leading, and then Angela Crawford will also helping. So they're going to feed you the questions. So thank you.
Merlin was one of my students. She'll tell you how wild it was.
Hey, Jason. It's so good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Thanks for coming and bringing all these real stories. And I, for one, would attend a whole session on Mama and Papa Reynolds stories. So
one day.
Just throwing that out there. We have a question from Natasha. It says, as a Latinx teacher, I wonder how I can make an impact. I want to dismantle white supremacy within high school ELA curriculum, and it is very much white and male-centered. Do you have any advice on how I can implement change and diversity and inclusion within literature?
Yeah, I do. First of all, shout out to the teachers. I'm always careful before I answer any question asked by a teacher. I want to be clear that I have the utmost respect for you, for the good ones especially, for the ones that care. And I want to say that before I answer that, there is no answer that I had. I'm always careful because I don't know where you teach, what the context is of like the environment in which you teach, right? So I can start saying all kind of wild stuff, which could be putting your job in danger. And I would never want to do that, right? And so I'm always a little careful. That being said, if you want to change the curriculum, and I know it's not this easy, right? I know that there are all kinds of weird checks and balances, and that there's so much political stuff happening that gets in the way of teachers teaching sometimes. But the first thing I say is if you want to change the curriculum, you just change the curriculum. Like you got to, introduce a new text, right? And if the text is something that people don't want to use, or the principal and administrative superintendent, parents, I get it. Start extracurricular book clubs, right? If you really want to, because I recognize that it can't always happen in the classroom. It should be, but I know that politics sometimes gets in the way of that. Don't be afraid. And I know who has the extra time, right? But if you do have a little, or if you know other teachers that you can sort of coalesce with, don't be afraid to start after school book clubs or lunchtime book clubs where you can read those books without them being attached to the curriculum. Because the other part about reading, and the other part about diversifying and decolonizing the curriculums is that it still doesn't negate the fact that the only way that young people have ever been taught to relate to reading is with a grade as the end game, which isn't healthy. And so I often wonder, is the advice to work in this stuff in your curriculum? Because I also don't want our kids to hate the color purple because you've attached it to a letter grade or a percentage, or to hate Ghost because now it's about the A, B's, C's, and D's. So I don't know, right? But I do think it's okay to start introducing certain things. Also, short stories are your friend. Short stories are your friend. Poetry is your friend, right? We got to remember that literature is broad. It's not just the novel. Man, it's not just the novel. Song lyrics are your friend, right? Graphic novels are your friend. All of these things count. We have to make a decision. Is what we want, is it literature or is it literacy? If it's literacy, then let's focus on that and not be afraid to introduce other forms of literature that may not be the novel, right? Because literacy is what was actually going to save these kids' lives. This is where their freedom lies, in literacy. But I can tell you right now, I have never read Moby Dick, and I am not made worse for it, right? I am not a worse person having not read some of these classics, right? Like, and so why not figure out ways to really engage them with literacy and using diverse means to do so, even if the diversity comes in the kind of genre in which we're presenting to them. You'd be surprised how a short story would change. You'd be surprised how something like Long Way Down or rap lyrics or all these things that we don't see as literature, even though we get proven over and over year after year that it actually is literature. Look, letters are letters. They all function. Narrative is everywhere. Let's not be so elitist, and let's try our best to save our children.
Thanks so much, Jason.
No doubt.
Awesome. Hi, Jason. So the question that I have comes from Ren. Ren alludes to the writing you did with Miles Morales, an Afro-Latino teenager living in New York City. How do you reckon with the many complicated intersections of identity, especially Black identity, and especially where it intersects with other marginalized identities.
You know, for that book, first of all, that's your house you in? That is beautiful. You live there? My goodness. You work at Lesley? This is what Lesley, this how you, wait a second. You work at Lesley? Because if so, I'm getting ready to ask. You're ready to ask for a raise. No, I'm kidding.
I didn't have all the books you have.
Well, you don't need them. That is gorgeous. You live in an aviary. All right. Here's the answer to this question. Look, I'm very careful about a few things. Number one, there's no model, like Black people, brown people, marginalized people are polylythic, first and foremost, right? The dangerous thing that has happened over the last 10 years is that people have sort of tried to pigeonhole all of us into a single mold, as if like there's only one kind of Black story and one kind of brown story and one kind, and if you don't get it right, then, you know, like I remember writing about, in Miles Morales, I wrote that he was eating chicharron. And I remember writing that into the story and being like, man, I love this detail, this cultural detail. Truth is, though, if he didn't eat chicharron, he would have been no less Puerto Rican. He'd have been no less a half Puerto Rican boy, right? But like what we do in the arts right now, specifically in literature, is we always say we got to figure out how to signal to the audience that there's some sort of cultural texture, which is a problem, which walks a fine line, because if it works, cool. If it doesn't, then it becomes performative, and performing Blackness is also assimilationism, right? Because it's not honest. It's not who you are. I tell my little brother all the time, hey man, you want to read anime and you want to all the things that he's into, because he grew up very differently than my older siblings and I, right? Very differently, and so he is a very different kind of kid. And I tell him, I don't want you to ever feel like you got to act like me or act like our older brother. You don't got to be that kind of person. That ain't you. And you don't have to be that person. You can be whoever you are, and you're no less Black. It's so silly that we think that there's some sort of stereotype or some kind of like weird. And you know what's really funny about it is that we also be the same people, especially this time of the year, who be like, hey man, Blackness is big, baby. It's broad. We do everything. We've done everything. No matter what you say, we were there. Rock and roll, we started it. Any kind of food, we did that first. Engineers, it was us. Vaccine, Black woman did it, right? We love to do this, right? We love it. And then the moment you put it in a book, it's like, this character ain't even Black, ain't Black enough, right? Like it's so silly. So you know what I do? Angela? The first thing I do is I start at the human level. This is a person. Human beings are really not that different. It's the same reason, you know, they used to tell me, it's like, you think you could write a girl, Jason? Can you write a girl protagonist? Yes, because girls are human beings, absolutely, right? And if I start there, then I'm 75% of the way done. If I start at the human level, the rest of it is about, it's the difference between, you know, baked chicken, fried chicken, and barbecue chicken. Chicken is chicken, and if it's cooked, it's cooked. The rest is just seasoning. You got to figure out what the right seasonings are, and you add those seasonings in. But if you start with chicken, cooked chicken, you're almost done. Like, you're almost done. And that's the way I think about all of that, you know.
True. Thank you so much.
For sure.
Always with the awesome analogies.
Hey, look, Merlin, you know right now, because I said that, it's a whole bunch of white people saying, now I get to write these Black characters. I knew it, right? He's giving me permission, you know what I mean? Take it easy. I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying do your due diligence and make sure you humanize the characters, which means you better be sure that you humanize us in real life first. That's all I'm gonna say about that. Continue.
So I'm gonna combine sort of a comment and a question. Someone who said that as a middle school teacher, they use your write prompts every Friday for creative writing. And they just wanted to give a deep appreciation for those and helping to inspire young writers. And couple it with a question asking if you think it's more engaging and useful to start discussions of writing with discussions of tone. And would it be worthwhile for English teachers of all levels to reframe teaching writing or English as teaching codes of power?
So you said, can you repeat it? Said you said branding with tone?
So reframe the teaching of writing or English as codes of power instead of Mm-hmm.
Wow, you know what? To be completely honest, I had never thought about it that way. But no, I'm gonna say no. Though I think it is super interesting to think about codes of power in relationship to literature and writing and English class and all that. What I think is necessary, I'm going to say no with an asterisk because I think it is important that those things are taught, right, within the context of literature. But what I honestly think should happen is we should return to teaching literature and English and writing as art. That's what I would love to see. I think it should be art class. They call it language arts, but we never talk about the art part of it. And I think that if we could figure out how to remind young people that it's art, then we also might just save their imaginations as well. We might also sort of imagine if every young person felt like they were an artist because they had to take English class. It would be amazing. It would change the way they move through the world. It would change the way they felt about themselves. And it would have to change the way teachers graded and sort of structured the pedagogy. Because if you're going to open it up to being art, you then have to open it up to having like a multitude of like ways of being done, which I think is a good idea, right? I think it's a good idea. And I think it complicates and sophisticates education in a way that we think we be doing right now by teaching Shakespeare over and over and over again. Don't get me wrong, I love Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare, but imagine if we taught Shakespeare the way Shakespeare was really meant to be taught, which is one, it was meant to be seen. And number two, Shakespeare was not this highfalutin intellectual scholar that we made him into. He was basically a soap opera writer of his time. You know what I mean? He was writing like, it was all very crass and like, and he was poking fun. He was poking fun at the power structures of his time as well, which then feeds back in that idea that the question was sort of framed around. I think both of those things have to exist, but I would lead with art and then connect art to to that power dynamic, because art is always a part of that as well. And do it that way instead of looking at English class as basically a soft form of science.
So I just want to jump in here to say we have a common problem, which is we run out of time and we have a lot of questions left. So we'll save those questions for you, but I'll let Angela ask the last question and then we can do the closing. All right. And wrap it up. Okay, Angela, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm combining these two questions that are from Amanda and Taylor. And the question asks for your advice for people who think that they're an assimilationist and want to become an anti-racist. And I'm combining that with an education graduate student who worries about their ability to cultivate a truly anti-racist classroom within the boundaries of assimilationist state standards, right? Anti-racist rhetoric and telling their students, well, they love them for being who they are, but at the same time, they need to teach them what they consider white academic grammar.
So first thing is this, there's no such thing as becoming an anti-racist. That's just not a thing. It's a dangerous thing to think about. What we're trying to do is work towards anti-racism, and every day you're sort of working toward that. I always frame it around misogyny, right? I'm a male, I'm a heterosexual man, right? Raised in America, born and raised in this country, which means that I have to work every day to be anti-misogynistic, right? But if I ever woke up one day and say I am an anti-misogynist, there's a good chance I'm going to hurt an awful lot of people, because misogyny, much like racism, changes, right? It's ethereal, and it sort of shape shifts and becomes gaseous in certain ways. And in order for us to keep on top of it, we have to continue to be vigilant and be changing, which means that we can't actually believe there's some kind of finish line, first and foremost. In terms of assimilationism, first thing I would say is extend to yourself a little grace. This isn't like my fear about these kinds of conversations is that people will use them to, I don't want anyone to walk away from this conversation feeling small, because that's not what it is. What it is though, is that now that we have language for this thing that you already know about yourself, Now we can start to sort of figure out what does it mean to undo some of it when it is safe to do so, because we don't live in an anti-racist world now. And so it's tricky for me to tell you, yeah, man, go out there and just do your thing, when it could really mean putting you on some kind of chopping block if you happen to be a Black or brown person. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we need to be aware of our habits and our identity stuff. We got to be aware of it. To do those things because you actually assume they make you superior is dangerous. To do them because you really believe that, like, it's better this way. I hear people all the time say, what's wrong with it? I've heard Black people who hate themselves say things like, man, the real problem is Black people, man. We really got so much, something's wrong with us. Ain't nothing wrong with us. Something's wrong with the country and the structure in which we exist, right? But because you believe something is wrong with us, that assimilationism is a different kind of assimilationism than somebody who says, let me go in here and play this game so I can keep it safe and take care of my babies. That's different. A mother asked me on tour once, she said, look, I got this little Black boy walking the streets, my son. I have to tell him how to be vigilant and how to move and act a certain way because I'm scared that police officers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can't look that mother in the face and tell her not to do that, right? All I can do is say, I just hope you're explaining to him why he is assimilating in these particular spaces. Explain it to him, but don't make it seem like do this because it's better than. It's not that it's better than. It's that we don't live in an anti-racist world, and so we have to make these kind of concessions until we do for the safety of our well-being. But explain it so that he knows what he's doing when he's doing it, right? And in terms of the classroom and an anti-racist classroom, I think the same thing applies. I think if you got to teach the white standard of English, as you were saying, explain why. Explain that it's not the only way. You know, when I was a teacher, because I used to be, people don't know this, but I was also a middle school teacher a long time ago. And my class was even wilder than my college school. But what I would have them do is I would have them translate Shakespeare. So I would pick a sonnet, right? We do, when my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, but she may see me as some untutored youth, unlearned of the world's false subtleties. And then I'd say, now you take those 4 lines and you translate them into quote unquote standard English. And they would say, okay, and they would do that translation. And then I say, now we're gonna translate standard English to the neighborhood. And they would be like, yo, shorty bugging. I don't know what's wrong with her. I want to believe her, but I really think she's full of it, right? And what would happen is they would be emboldened because they understood that their language had value, standard English had value, Shakespearean English has value, and they comprehended Shakespeare. All 3 things happened simultaneously, and we got to have a conversation about the standardization of English, or what standardizing something even means in the first place, so that they know what they're learning and why they're learning it, but that it's not the end all be all, and that it doesn't have to devalue who it is they actually are when they walk out of them school doors. Cool?
Awesome. I love it.
Thank you, Jason. If you had a mic, you would just drop it, like right now. Just drop the mic. So I want to take this opportunity to just say thank you. Thank you, Jason, for your continued contributions to young people all over the world and for your work here at Lesley. We know it's not enough to just watch, so we will participate. Thanks to Janet Steinmeier and to Jonathan Jefferson for their vision to host the Spring Speaker Series. Thanks to Danielle Georges for her role today and as director of the MFA in Creative Writing Program. And thanks to Candice, who works behind the scenes to get Jason where he needs to be. We appreciate you, Candice.
Absolutely.
And big thank yous to our planning team, to Isabel Olson, for Laura Gerhard, Meenakshi Shabra, Brendan Walsh, Charles Cooper, and our colleagues in communications and marketing. And to our 2 question and answers facilitators, Angela Crawford-Irvin and Merlin Mayhew, thank you. And to our audience here today, thank you very much. Thank you all for being here and for participating with us. And we look forward to the other speaker series that will come up in the next few months, weeks and months. Thank you again.
Later.
Bye-bye. Thank you.